reaction now from Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, independent senator from Vermont. Senator, good to see you. What's your reaction to President Trump asking the president of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to do this, and Netanyahu obliging?
Well, I wish I could tell you, Ali, that I am shocked. I am not. We have a president who tragically is a racist, is a xenophobe, and who is a religious bigot. But the idea that a member of the United States Congress cannot visit a nation, which, by the way, we support to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, is clearly an outrage. And if Israel doesn't want members of the United States Congress to visit their country to get a firsthand look at what's going on, and I've been there many, many times, but if he doesn't want members to visit, maybe he can respectfully decline the billions of dollars that we give to Israel.
Over time, in excess of $140 billion. Last year alone, $3 billion in various types of aid. You've actually suggested that might be used to leverage some of Israel's behavior that Representatives Omar and Tlaib are critical of, as you've been critical of.
Well, all that I am saying is that we need a Middle East policy which is even-handed, which protects the independence and the safety of Israel, but also shows respect to the Palestinian people, many of whom in Gaza and elsewhere are suffering incredibly. Unemployment rate off the charts. People cannot leave their community. And I think what the United States should be doing, especially with the enormous amount of money we're spending there, is to demand that Israel and the Palestinian leadership sit down and start working out their differences and create peace in that troubled region.
Senator, I'm never going to pass an opportunity when you're on with me to talk about the economy. I want to talk about what's going on this week. Donald Trump's trade war, the effect that it's having. Look, he's been roundly criticized for the way he's handled this, not critical of the fact that he and some of his supporters believe that China needs to be dealt with differently. You too have had views, and many of your supporters have had views that we lose out to manufacturing that comes from low-wage countries like China. Watching what you're watching now, how would a President Bernie Sanders deal with trade issues differently? Because you were against the TPP. You have come out against a lot of these trade agreements. Yep. So how would you handle matters differently so that we don't get ourselves into the pickle we're in right now?
Well, first of all, you don't do trade policy by tweet. You don't have a belligerent policy toward our allies all over the world. What you do is sit down with the stakeholders, which is labor, which are farmers, and you work out a trade policy which works for ordinary Americans and not just large corporations, which has historically been what our trade policy is about. Look, the truth is that if you looked at NAFTA and PNTR with China, that has cost us some 4 million jobs. So I happen to believe in trade. I'm a strong believer in trade. But it cannot be unfettered free trade, which it really is not. It's nothing free about it. But it has to be fair trade, which protects American workers and farmers.
Senator, when you got into government, trade, I'm making this up, but it was somewhere around 20% of global GDP. It's now somewhere around 60, in excess of 60% of GDP. The world got richer for it. GDP is higher. Corporate profitability is higher. The fact is there's more money because of trade. We haven't used that money to train people, to retrain people, to equip people for the future. Is trade really the enemy, or is how we deal with the profits from trade the problem?
Well, Ali, I think trade is one of the problems. Automation and artificial intelligence, which are going to cost us many, many jobs, are another part of the problem. But to answer your question, when we talk about the overall economy, it's more than trade. You have to look at a situation where today you have 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. That's not just trade. There's a lot of factors involved there. You have major corporations like Amazon not paying a nickel in federal income taxes. You got half of the American people working paycheck to paycheck. 87 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. And tonight, some 500,000 Americans are going to be sleeping out on the street when 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. So the bottom line there is trade is one of the issues, not the only one. We need an economy and a government that works for everybody, not just the 1% which is currently the case.
What does it look like to work for everybody? And I know we'll get to Medicare for all in a second, because that's one of the things you say will work for everybody. But what does it mean for the rest of people who are not employed? Who it's not a huge percentage of our population. It's a very low percentage, but it's stubborn. There are a number of people in this country, somewhere around 10 million people, who are not participating in this economy.
But Ali, it's not just the unemployed. And you're right, there are more than we think, and they're hurting. It is, in fact, tens of millions of people who are trying to get by today on 10, 11, 12 bucks an hour. You can't do it. It is people in Vermont and in California working 2 or 3 jobs in order to pay the bills that their families are needing. It is elderly people who are trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000 a year Social Security. It is people, 1 out of 5 people cannot afford the medicine that their doctors prescribe. So the truth is, you got an economy that's doing really, really well for the people on top, but a lot of people are hurting in the bottom 50%, and that is an issue we've got to talk about.
All right, let's talk about Medicare for all. You know, I like talking about this with you.
Yes,
Kevin,
I know.
coming from Canada, I understand what everybody having health care looks like. However, one of the things you and I have talked about is that there will be structural change with your plan. There will be people put out of their jobs, and there'll be a transition, and you've talked about it taking at least 4 years to get done, if not longer. Now we have a different problem on our hands. We have a president. We're 10 years and 2 months into an expansion. It's a very long one. At some point, there's going to be a recession. There are some people saying this president might march us headlong into one with his trade policies. What happens? Bernie Sanders wins the election. President Bernie Sanders, are you going to implement Medicare for all right off the top if you happen to be in a bad economy?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Well, this will improve the economy. When you got 87 million people who can't afford to go to the doctor, you got 30,000 people who are going to die this year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. When you have 500,000 people, I think it's unbelievable, 500,000 people go bankrupt because they cannot afford the outrageous medical bills they get.
Only country in the developed world where that happens.
That's right. So if you're asking me overall, will it improve the economy to have Medicare for all over a 4-year transition? The answer is absolutely yes. And I'll tell you one of the things we don't talk enough about. It will help home health care for the elderly who don't have to go into a nursing home because my legislation covers home health care. The other thing it does, which is pretty amazing, is that if you are in a job right now, and there are millions of people who are at a job that they really don't like, but they're there because they get decent health care. When you have Medicare for all, suddenly you're going to see a whole lot of people starting small businesses, going out and doing all kinds of incredible things because they are not now chained down at a job which they have only because they have decent health care.
Senator, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.